My name is Camille Turner. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family treated my house like it was their inheritance, not my home. I still remember the first night I slept there. It was a small two-story house in a quiet neighborhood outside Atlanta. The walls were bare, the floors still smelled of fresh polish, and I sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, eating takeout Chinese food straight from the box. I'd worked 6 years straight, 2 jobs, one of them overnight to make that moment happen. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that every sacrifice, every tear, and every lonely night meant something. But to my family, it was simply the family home. My older sister, Elaine, was the kind of person who always believed she deserved the best, even when she hadn't earned it. She was 3 years older than me and married to a man named Marcus, who ran a small construction business. They lived in a rented apartment because, as Elaine often said, why tie yourself down to a mortgage? My younger sister, Nina, was the wild one, the free spirit who bounced between jobs and boyfriends like seasons changing. She had an infectious laugh and a knack for turning every minor inconvenience into a family emergency. And then there were my parents, who lived just 20 minutes away. My mom, Sandra, had a gentle smile but a sharp tongue, and my dad, Howard, was quiet, too quiet sometimes, the kind of man who let mom's opinions speak for both of them. When I bought the house, everyone seemed thrilled for about 5 minutes. Then came the comments. "It's such a lovely place," Elaine said during her first visit. "Feels like it belongs in the family, you know, something to pass down one day." She said it with a laugh, but I could hear the undertone. Nina chimed in, "Yeah, it's big enough for all of us during holidays, like permanent family headquarters." At first, I smiled and played along. I told myself it was their way of being proud. But that illusion faded quickly. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around that year, my house had become the place. I didn't even get a choice. My mom called one evening in early November, saying, "Camille, everyone's agreed we'll do Thanksgiving at your house again this year. You've got the space after all." I didn't remember agreeing to host, but saying no to my mom was like trying to stop a freight train with a feather. I spent days cooking turkey, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, all the dishes she used to make when we were kids. My sisters didn't lift a finger. Elaine showed up early, criticizing my table settings, while Nina arrived late, arms full of wine bottles she probably couldn't afford. They laughed, bickered, and made themselves comfortable while I rushed around trying to make everything perfect. When we finally sat down to eat, my mother sighed contentedly and said, "It's so good that you bought this house, Camille. It's a blessing to have a place where the family can gather. It feels like it belongs to all of us." Her words landed like a small, sharp knife. I stared at the tablecloth, pretending not to hear. Elaine nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I mean, it's basically the Turner family home now. I can already imagine the kids running through here someday." I wanted to ask whose kids she meant, certainly not mine. It was easier to swallow resentment than start a scene. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the doorway and looked around. Dirty dishes piled up on the counters, crumbs on the floor, half-empty glasses everywhere. The laughter that had once filled the space was gone, replaced by silence and exhaustion. I realized then that while everyone else had gone home, I was left cleaning up their mess again. It became a pattern. Every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering, somehow it always circled back to my house. Elaine and Nina treated it like a family retreat, dropping by unannounced, leaving their stuff behind, arguing about what I should do with the backyard or the spare bedroom. My mom made casual comments like, "You should really think about adding a second bathroom, it'll make it easier when we all visit." We all visit. It never occurred to them that I might want privacy, or peace, or ownership of my own life. One weekend, I came home from work to find Elaine rearranging my living room furniture. "It looks more open this way," she said casually, as if she lived there. My patience cracked a little that day, but I stayed quiet. It felt like if I spoke up, I'd be the bad guy, the ungrateful daughter, the selfish sister. Still, it hurt. Every jab about my nice house, Every assumption that I owed them something, it piled up like dust in corners I couldn't reach. The worst part was that they didn't even realize what they were doing. To them, my success wasn't mine. It was communal property. I'd worked hard, so they didn't have to. One Sunday afternoon, I overheard my mother on the phone saying, "Well, at least we know Camille will always take care of us. That house will stay in the family, no matter what." That was the moment the truth hit me like a cold wave. They didn't see my home as a symbol of my independence, they saw it as security for themselves. I wasn't Camille, their daughter or sister anymore. I was a resource, a backup plan. I remember sitting on my porch that evening, watching the sun fade over the neighborhood. The world looked calm, but inside me, something started to unravel. I realized that the house I once loved had become a cage made of expectations. Every brick felt heavier, every room filled with invisible strings tying me to people who didn't respect me. And yet, I couldn't imagine walking away. I'd fought too hard to build this life. Still, as the next Thanksgiving approached, a small voice inside whispered something. New, something bold. It said, "This isn't love. This is possession." And for the first time, I couldn't unhear it. That Thanksgiving, I realized they'd stopped seeing me as family, just as the owner of something they thought should be theirs. I used to believe family always had a right to be part of your life until mine started treating my home like a public park. It began subtly. A few weeks after that first uncomfortable Thanksgiving, I came home from work late on a Friday evening, exhausted from a 12-hour shift at the marketing firm where I worked. My feet ached, my eyes burned, and all I wanted was a hot shower and quiet. But when I pulled into the driveway, there was already another car parked there, Elaine's white SUV. For a second, I thought maybe she'd stopped by to drop something off. But as soon as I opened my front door, I heard the hum of the TV and smelled takeout food. Elaine was lounging on my couch in sweatpants, eating Chinese noodles like she lived there. "Hey Cam," she said casually, not even looking up. "I hope you don't mind. I needed a little space from Marcus. He's being impossible again. Just for a few days, okay?" She said it like she was doing me a favor. I wanted to protest, but I was too tired to start an argument. So, I mumbled something about her making herself at home and went upstairs to my room, shutting the door behind me. That night, I lay awake listening to her talk loudly on the phone until after midnight. A few days turned into a week, then two. I came home to find her laundry in my washer, her makeup on my bathroom counter, her coffee mugs on my nightstand. She'd started bringing groceries, but mostly things she liked: oat milk, protein bars, imported teas. When I finally asked how long she planned to stay, she rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Camille. It's just until things cool down with Marcus. You've got plenty of room." And just like that, my home became her refuge. 2 weeks later, while I was still adjusting to Elaine's temporary stay, my younger sister Nina showed up with 3 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag. "Hey Cam," she said brightly, hugging me at the door. "I just need to crash here for a little while. My new lease doesn't start until next month." I blinked. "What do you mean, crash here?" "I already have Elaine staying in the guest room." "Oh, that's fine," she said cheerfully. "I can take the couch." "I don't mind. It's temporary." That word had started to sound like a curse. By the end of the week, my quiet home felt like a college dorm. Elaine and Nina bickered constantly over the TV remote, over what to cook, over whose laundry was in the dryer. I couldn't find peace in my own kitchen. I'd come home from work to find both of them sprawled on the sofa, shoes off, surrounded by snacks and half-finished drinks. One morning, I came downstairs to find Nina frying eggs while blasting music from her phone. "You don't mind, right?" she said. "I'm making enough for everyone." The problem was, she used my last eggs. Then my mother started dropping by. She said she wanted to help me keep the house clean, but all she really did was criticize how I lived. "This place looks too sterile," she said one afternoon, fluffing my throw pillows. "You should make it cozier, for family. Maybe we could put a recliner over there for your father when he visits." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and said, "Sure, Mom, maybe someday." But someday was already happening without my permission. Within a month, my house stopped feeling like mine. Elaine treated the spare room as her own. Nina's boxes had spread into the hallway, and my mother had a key she never returned. I'd leave for work at 7 and come home to find my fridge rearranged, my pantry half empty, and the thermostat changed. The day I found my favorite ceramic mug shattered in the sink, I lost it. "Who broke this?" I demanded, holding the pieces. Elaine shrugged. "Oh, sorry. It slipped when I was making coffee. It's just a mug, Cam." "No," I said quietly. "It's not just a mug. It was Dad's. He gave it to me before he died." For the first time, the room went silent. Nina looked uncomfortable. Elaine muttered, "You're overreacting." But I wasn't. That mug represented something sacred, my father's quiet belief in me when no one else had it. And seeing it shattered felt symbolic. That night, I sat on my bed, feeling like a stranger in my own house. I wanted to lock every door, pack a bag, and disappear. But where would I go? It was my home. Yet I felt trapped inside it. I started noticing little things that made my stomach twist. Elaine would bring her friends over when I wasn't home. Nina would borrow my clothes without asking. My mother once left a note on the counter. "We should talk about setting up a room for me when I get older." That line burned in my mind. When she gets older? As in she'd already planned to live here? I thought about my father again. He'd warned me once. Gently. About Mom's controlling nature. "She doesn't mean harm, Cam," he'd said, "but she's used to getting her way. Don't let her make your life hers." I hadn't understood it then. Now I did. I began locking my bedroom door at night not because I didn't trust them, but because I needed one space that was completely mine. But it wasn't enough. One Sunday morning, I came downstairs to find Elaine and Nina sitting at the table, drinking coffee. Elaine looked up and said, "We've been talking. You really shouldn't have to pay this mortgage alone. Maybe we could chip in a little and make this a family house." I froze. "What do you mean, family house?" Elaine smiled like she was pitching a business deal. "You know, shared ownership. Mom could move in later. We'd all help with bills and maintenance. You'd still live here, of course. But it'd belong to all of us." Nina nodded eagerly. "Yeah, like a family estate. Isn't that kind of beautiful?" I felt the room tilt. They were serious. They wanted to own my home. The one I'd worked every hour for. I said quietly, "No. This isn't a group project. I bought this house myself." Elaine frowned. "Why are you being so defensive?" "We're trying to help you. You've always been so controlling about everything." That word hung in the air like smoke. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Upstairs, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the tired, angry woman looking back at me. My home, my peace, my independence, it had all been swallowed by people who claimed to love me. I realized something painful that day. When people feel entitled to your kindness, they'll never recognize your boundaries, and mine were gone. That evening, I sat on the porch alone as the sun went down. The laughter of my sisters echoing from inside. I thought about packing up and leaving, but I couldn't stomach the idea of abandoning my dream. Still, I knew something had to change. Because if I didn't take back control soon, I wouldn't just lose my house, I'd lose myself. That's when I realized they didn't love me. They loved what I owned. Thanksgiving used to mean warmth, laughter, and family until it became a battlefield inside my own house. By the time November rolled around again, I was already dreading the holiday. The idea of cooking for the same people who treated my home like theirs made my stomach twist. Still, I told myself that if I hosted one last time, maybe things would smooth over. Maybe they'd see how much they'd taken advantage of me. Hope is such a foolish thing sometimes. It started 2 weeks before Thanksgiving when my mom called me one evening while I was at work. "Camille, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy. "We've all been talking, and of course we're doing Thanksgiving at your house again this year." I took a breath. "Mom, I'm not sure that's a good idea this time. Things have been A little crowded lately. She laughed softly, brushing off my hesitation like lint from her sleeve. Oh, don't be silly. It's tradition now. You know your house just feels like home to everyone. I'll bring the pies. You just handle the turkey. Before I could protest, she'd hung up. When I told Elaine and Nina later, they didn't even ask if I wanted to host. Elaine said, "Perfect, Marcus's parents can come too." "They haven't seen the house yet," Nina added. "I'll bring my new boyfriend, you'll love him." That made 6 additional people on top of the 3 who were already living there. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled tightly and said, "Fine, but we're keeping it simple this year." Simple, of course, turned into chaos. The night before Thanksgiving, Elaine monopolized my kitchen, insisting her signature mac and cheese needed oven space before the turkey. Nina was decorating the dining table with cheap gold tinsel she'd bought from a dollar store, leaving glitter everywhere. My mother stood behind me, giving constant unsolicited advice. "Don't use that roasting pan, it dries out the meat. You're using too much butter, dear. Did you clean the baseboards? You know guests notice these things." By midnight, I was standing in my kitchen surrounded by dirty bowls, flour dust, and the sound of Elaine's laughter echoing from the living room. I felt like a servant in my own home. The next morning, I woke early to prepare the turkey. I tried to remind myself that once the meal was done, it would be over. One more day, I told myself. You can survive one more day. By noon, my house was buzzing. Marcus's parents arrived first, kind but oblivious people who complimented everything in a way that somehow made it worse. "What a lovely house," Marcus's mother gushed. "You're so lucky your family has this place to gather." Your family. The words stung. Then came Nina and her new boyfriend, a loud guy named Travis who immediately plopped onto my couch, kicked off his shoes, and turned on the football game. "Feels like home already," he said with a grin. Elaine and Marcus arrived last, carrying too many bags and too much attitude. "Camille, you didn't set up enough chairs," Elaine said, glancing around like a disappointed teacher. I bit back a sharp retort and pulled out extra chairs from the garage. For the first hour, things were tolerable. The smell of turkey filled the house, and soft music played in the background. But peace with my family never lasted long. During dinner, the conversation turned casual at first. Marcus bragged about a new client, Nina gushed about Travis, and my mother criticized the gravy for being a little salty. Then Elaine, who'd had a few glasses of wine, leaned back in her chair and said with a smirk, "You know, Mom, when you're older, we'll have to figure out who's taking care of you. I guess it'll probably be Camille since she's got the house." Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. I stared at my plate, forcing a smile. "Elaine, that's not funny." "Oh, come on," she said, waving her fork. "It's a compliment. You're responsible. You've got this beautiful home. It's practically the family's anyway." Nina nodded. "Yeah, like our home base. I mean, you're single, Cam. It's not like you need all this space." My hands tightened around my fork. "Excuse me?" Elaine rolled her eyes. "Don't get defensive. We're just saying you have more room than you need. Maybe someday, when you're ready, we can all pitch in to keep it up, you know, keep it in the family." Keep it in the family. Those words echoed through my head like a taunt. I looked around the table at the Vonber, people eating food I cooked, in a home I paid for, on plates I bought, and realized none of them saw me as an individual anymore. "You all keep saying family home, but this isn't the family home. It's my home. I bought it, I pay for it, I take care of it." Silence fell for a moment. Then my mother sighed. "Camille, no one's trying to take anything from you. We're just saying you should think about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone?" I repeated. "You mean everyone except me," Elaine scoffed. "You're overreacting again. God, you always make everything about you." I felt something inside me crack. All the quiet resentment, all the swallowed words, all the forced smiles, it all came pouring out. "Because it is about me, Elaine. This is my house. You move in without asking. You rearrange my furniture. You bring people over. And now you're talking about who gets it when I'm gone?" Do you even hear yourselves? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Nina muttered, "Wow, chill out, we're family." I laughed bitterly. Exactly, family, the one word people use to justify anything they want. Elaine crossed her arms. You know what? If you're going to act like this, maybe you don't deserve this house. Dad would have wanted it to stay in the family. That hit low. Dad. The one person who had truly understood me. I swallowed hard. Don't you dare use Dad to guilt me into keeping what's mine. Elaine pushed back her chair. Fine, be selfish. But one day, you'll realize family is all you have. I stood there, shaking. My chest felt tight, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, cry, throw them all out, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. A slow, calm smile that scared even me. You're right, I said softly. Family is all I have. And as they went back to eating, oblivious to what those words meant, something inside me shifted, permanently. Because I knew right then I was done trying to be the good daughter, the good sister, the dependable one. They thought they'd broken me. But they'd just given me the push I needed. By the time the last plate was cleared, my decision was made. They had no idea that by Christmas, this wouldn't be their problem anymore. Sometimes, the quietest people break the loudest. The morning after Thanksgiving, my house looked like a war zone. Crumpled napkins covered the table, empty glasses lined the counter, and a half-eaten pumpkin pie sat forgotten on the stove. I stood in the middle of it all, holding a trash bag, feeling like I was cleaning up the aftermath of a disaster I hadn't caused. The silence was heavy, the kind of silence that makes your chest hurt. The kind that follows a storm you know changed everything. As I scraped leftover turkey into the trash, I replayed every word from the night before. Elaine's smug voice. My mother's sigh. Nina's indifference. It's basically our family home. Don't be so dramatic. We're just trying to help. I realized then that nothing I said or did would ever be enough for them. I could host every dinner, pay every bill, give every inch, and they'd still find a way to make me feel guilty for not giving more. For years, I'd convinced myself that being the responsible one was a good thing. But that morning, standing barefoot in a kitchen that no longer felt like mine, I saw it differently. Responsibility wasn't respect. It was servitude wrapped in politeness. That realization hit harder than I expected. I dropped the dishcloth on the counter and sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd once celebrated buying this house. The same table where my family had laughed while casually dividing my future like it was dessert. And something inside me snapped. Not the kind of snapping that comes with shouting or slamming doors, it was quiet. Controlled. The kind of breaking that feels almost peaceful because it's been coming for so long. I got up, walked to my laptop, and opened a browser. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I finally typed, "How to sell your house fast." It was impulsive, irrational, and completely unlike me. But as I scrolled through listings and saw words like cash offers, quick closing, and no repairs needed, I felt something unfamiliar: freedom. The idea of selling my home had never crossed my mind before. I'd fought too hard to buy it, to maintain it, to make it mine. But now, the idea didn't feel like surrender, it felt like taking back control. Still, part of me hesitated. Wouldn't selling mean they win? I thought. Wouldn't it mean giving up the one thing I built on my own? Then I remembered Elaine rearranging my living room without asking. Nina borrowing money she never paid back. My mother talking about her future room. And I realized it wasn't my home anymore. They'd taken it piece by piece, one unspoken favor at a time. By the time I shut my laptop, the decision was already forming like a seed taking root. I wasn't going to fight them anymore. I wasn't going to argue or beg for boundaries they'd never respect. I was going to disappear from the life they thought they owned. But I needed to be smart. I couldn't just list the house online and expect them not to notice. They'd find a way to sabotage it. Elaine would throw a tantrum. My mom would cry. Nina would guilt-trip me. No, this had to be quiet, strategic. I made a plan. Step 1. Keep everything normal. Step 2. Find a discreet real estate agent. Step 3. Sell before anyone suspected a thing. For the first time in months, I felt calm. That night, I took a long bath, letting the water drown out my thoughts. The house creaked softly around me, and I tried to remember what it felt like when it was still mine. The sound of my own laughter echoing in the hallways. The smell of paint when I'd first decorated the living room. The late nights I spent journaling by the window. It had once been a place of peace. Now it felt like a cage lined with family portraits. When I climbed into bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "You're done being their doormat." The next morning, I woke with a strange kind of determination. I called into work, saying I needed a personal day. Then, I started cleaning, not the usual kind of cleaning, but the kind that feels like preparation for something final. I packed a few boxes of sentimental things. My dad's old watch, my college diploma, a handful of photo albums. Everything else could go. Around noon, I made the call. The woman who answered introduced herself as Darla Vincent, a real estate agent with a calm, confident voice. "How can I help you today?" she asked. There was a pause before I spoke. "I'm thinking about selling my house," I said slowly. "And I'd like to do it quietly." Darla didn't ask why. She just said, "I understand. Why don't we meet tomorrow morning? We can discuss options." That one sentence felt like an anchor in the middle of chaos. After hanging up, I walked through the house, touching the walls, the windows, the furniture. Every corner held a memory, but also a wound. I realized that loving something doesn't always mean keeping it, it can mean knowing when to let it go. That night, my mother called again. "Camille, have you thought about Christmas dinner yet? We'll do it at your place, right?" I smiled, a strange calmness washing over me. "We'll see, Mom. Things might look a little different by then." She chuckled, unaware of the meaning behind my words. "As long as it's at your house, I don't care what looks different." When I hung up, I laughed softly to myself. If only she knew. Later, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the quiet neighborhood outside. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, just resolved. The decision to sell wasn't about revenge, not at first. It was about reclaiming something I'd lost. Peace. But deep down, a small, stubborn part of me wanted them to feel what I'd felt for years, powerless. That night, I wrote a single sentence in my journal. "By next Thanksgiving, this house won't belong to them or to me." When I closed the notebook, I felt a strange lightness, like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. For years, I'd let guilt keep me chained to their expectations. I'd mistaken obligation for love and compliance for kindness. But standing there in the quiet, I realized that every time I let them take from me, I was teaching them it was okay to do so. And I was done teaching that lesson. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by everything I'd built, and whispered, "It's time." It was the first honest thing I'd said in a long time. They thought I'd always be their safety net. I was about to cut every string. Freedom began quietly with a phone call to a real estate agent named Darla Vincent. When we met the next morning at a small coffee shop downtown, I half expected her to look at me like I was crazy. Instead, she listened. Really listened. She was in her 40s, confident but kind, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. After I explained my situation, how my family had turned my home into their personal playground, she nodded thoughtfully, stirring her coffee. "I've seen this before," she said finally. "People think ownership is shared just because they're family. You're not wrong to want peace, Camille. We'll keep it private. No yard signs, no open houses, no gossip." Her calm certainty soothed me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I told her I wanted the sale fast and discreet. She smiled. "Then I'll make it happen." We scheduled a walkthrough that Friday. The rest of that week, I played my role perfectly. To my family, nothing seemed different. I still smiled at breakfast, nodded through Elaine's endless stories, pretended to listen when Nina gushed about her new boyfriend. Inside, though, I was counting down the hours until Friday. When Darla arrived, I felt a rush of both fear and relief. She moved through the house like a quiet observer, taking notes on her clipboard. "You've maintained this place beautifully," she said. I laughed softly. "That's because I'm the only one who actually cleans it." She smiled knowingly. "You'd be surprised how often I hear that." We sat in the kitchen afterward, and she explained the plan. "We'll list it off-market. I have a few clients who are looking for something like this, a young couple relocating to Atlanta. I can have them look at it by next week. You'll need to start packing your personal items, but keep the house looking lived in until the closing date." "Can we make it quick?" I asked. "Like, before the holidays?" Darla nodded. "If we move fast, we can close before Thanksgiving. You'll be out before anyone even realizes it's happening." That sentence sent chills down my spine. Before anyone realizes it's happening. Over the next few days, I became a quiet conspirator in my own life. I packed a few boxes every night after everyone had gone to bed. Photos, books, small things that mattered to me. I hid them in the trunk of my car and drove them to a small storage unit I'd rented under a different name. Each trip felt like a secret victory. Elaine noticed me cleaning more than usual. "What's with the sudden nesting phase?" she teased. "Just spring cleaning early," I said, keeping my voice light. Nina barely looked up from her phone. "Can you not pack my stuff by mistake? I'm still using half the things in the guest closet." I smiled tightly. "Trust me, I wouldn't dare." Every lie came easier than the last. Darla called midweek to say she'd found potential buyers, a young couple named Logan and Sierra Whitmore. They'd just had their first child and were looking for a home where they could build a life. Something about that phrase made my chest tighten. I'd once thought this house would be where I built my life too. When Logan and Sierra came for a private showing that Friday, I took the day off work and made sure Elaine and Nina were both out running errands. I lit a few candles, baked cookies, anything to make the place feel warm, inviting. The moment they walked in, I could tell they loved it. Sierra ran her hand along the staircase banister, smiling softly. "It feels like home," she said. Logan nodded. "It's perfect. We can see our daughter growing up here." For a moment, I had to look away. Their excitement reminded me of myself 5 years earlier when this same house had symbolized hope. After they left, Darla turned to me and said, "They want to make an offer. Full asking price." "Already?" She smiled. "They said it just felt right. Sometimes, the right buyers find you." We moved fast. Paperwork, inspections, signatures all done quietly behind closed doors. Darla was efficient and discreet. No signs ever appeared on the lawn. My family remained blissfully unaware. Meanwhile, I continued living my double life, pretending everything was normal while secretly packing my memories into boxes. Some nights, I'd sit in the emptying living room, surrounded by half-filled cartons, and feel waves of nostalgia. The echoes of laughter from my first housewarming party, the nights I'd fallen asleep on the couch after long workdays, the quiet mornings with coffee by the window. It hurt to let go, but it also felt right. Freedom was a strange mix of grief and relief. One evening, as I packed the last of my father's belongings, a small collection of woodworking tools, Elaine walked in unexpectedly. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "Why are you packing?" My heart jumped. "Relax," I said quickly. "I'm reorganizing the storage room." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been reorganizing all week," I smiled. "You know me, I can't sit still." She shrugged, satisfied enough to drop it, but not without muttering. "You're weird sometimes, Camille." That night, I sat on my bed, my mind racing. I realized how deeply I'd learned to mask my feelings around them. They never noticed because they never looked, not really. A few days later, Darla called with the final news. "We're closing next Tuesday," she said. "Once the funds clear, the house will officially be theirs." I froze. "That's 2 days before Thanksgiving. Is that a problem?" she asked gently. I laughed softly. "Not at all, it's perfect." She paused. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Camille?" It's a big change. I've never been more ready, I said. And I meant it. That weekend, I packed faster. I moved essentials into a small apartment downtown, a quiet place with tall windows and a view of the city lights. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I didn't tell anyone. By Monday, the house was spotless again, as if nothing had changed. Elaine and Nina assumed I was preparing for the holiday. They spent the day shopping for decorations while my mother texted me a list of things she wanted me to cook. I didn't respond. When Tuesday came, I met Darla at the title office. Signing the papers felt surreal. Every stroke of the pen loosened another invisible chain around my heart. When it was done, Darla handed me the final document and said, "Congratulations, Camille. The house officially belongs to Logan and Sierra Whitmore." I smiled, a real smile. Not the polite one I'd worn for years. Driving home that day, I didn't feel sadness. I felt peace. The kind that comes after a long fight you didn't even realize you'd been in. That evening, as I stood in the living room for the last time, the sun was setting through the windows, painting the walls in gold. I whispered a quiet thank you to the house, to the version of myself who had built it, and to the woman I was becoming by letting it go. I left the keys on the kitchen counter, turned off the lights, and closed the door behind me. The next time my family gathered here, they'd be standing in a stranger's home. As I signed the final papers, I realized this house no longer belonged to me or to them. The week before Thanksgiving, my family still had no idea their so-called family home wasn't ours anymore. It was almost poetic the way everything looked the same while everything had already changed. The walls still held their pictures, the furniture still sat in the same spots, and the fridge still had my mother's list of holiday must-haves stuck to it with a magnet shaped like a turkey. But behind the ordinary, there was a quiet secret pulsing through every room. I was already gone. Darla had handled everything perfectly. The Whitmores, Logan, and Sierra were set to move in 2 days after Thanksgiving. The funds had cleared, the documents were signed. All I had to do now was make it through one last meal under this roof. The irony was, my family couldn't stop talking about Thanksgiving that year. Elaine was organizing the menu like she was running a catering business. Nina was inviting her new boyfriend's parents without even asking. My mother kept insisting on little improvements to make the house more welcoming. They were planning a celebration inside a home that no longer belonged to them. It should have made me angry, but it didn't. It made me oddly calm, like watching a storm form on the horizon, knowing exactly when it would hit and realizing you were already standing somewhere safe. I woke early each morning that week, made coffee, and sat in the empty dining room watching sunlight creep across the floorboards. The quiet had a different weight now. It wasn't loneliness, it was relief. For years, my home had been filled with noise, demands, laughter that wasn't kind, footsteps that weren't mine. But now, the silence meant freedom was near. Darla called on Monday to confirm the final handoff details. "Everything's on schedule," she said. "The Whitmores will get the keys Friday morning." "Perfect," I said. "I'll have everything cleared out by Thursday night." She hesitated before saying, "Camille, you don't owe me an explanation, but can I ask something?" "Sure. Why Thanksgiving? Most people would have waited until after." I smiled faintly. "Because this is the day they always take from me. For once, I'm taking something back." Darla was silent for a moment, then she said softly, "Then I hope it's everything you need it to be." After we hung up, I started packing the last few things I hadn't already moved. I left the furniture, the dishes, even the curtains, it all came with the sale. I only took what mattered. The box of photos from my childhood, my father's tools, a quilt my grandmother had sewn for me when I was little. I hid the packed boxes in the trunk of my car, careful not to let anyone see. The rest of the house stayed picture-perfect for Thanksgiving Day, exactly how my family expected. That evening, Elaine burst through the front door carrying grocery bags. "Camille, the store was insane. I got the good wine, though." "Great," I said, smiling. She dropped the bags on the counter. "You look relaxed. What's up with that? Usually, you're freaking out before these dinners." I shrugged. "Guess I've learned to stop worrying about what people think." She laughed. not realizing how true that was. Nina came in later, chattering on the phone with her boyfriend. "Don't forget dessert, babe. My sister always underestimates how much we eat." Her words barely reached me. I was somewhere else entirely. I had already moved on in my mind, living in my new apartment, waking up alone, free from the endless cycle of guilt and obligation. On Wednesday, my mother arrived early to help. She bustled around the kitchen, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. "This is why you're single, Camille," she said with a sigh, rearranging the spice rack. "You focus too much on things being perfect. No man wants that pressure." I smiled faintly, my hands deep in soapy water. "You're right, Mom. No man does." She chuckled, thinking she'd taught me something. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I walked through each room for what I knew would be the last time. The house looked warm and peaceful in the dim light, but it was a mirage. I touched the edge of the dining table, remembering all the times I'd sat there feeling invisible. I stood in the living room where I'd once cried silently after my father's funeral. I looked at the staircase I'd painted myself, each stroke filled with pride that no one else had shared. Tomorrow, they'd fill this place with noise again, with their careless laughter and entitlement, but this time, I wouldn't care. I'd already said my goodbye. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke early and started cooking like I always did. Turkey in the oven, potatoes boiling on the stove, the scent of cinnamon filling the air. The routine felt surreal now. It was my last performance in the home that had been my stage for too long. Elaine came downstairs in a silk robe, yawning. "Smells amazing." "You're the best, Cam. I don't know what we'd do without you." I met her eyes and smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." She didn't even flinch. She thought I was joking. By noon, the table was set, the candles were lit, and the food was ready. My mother arrived in her best pearls, Nina in a new dress, and everyone seemed blissfully content. They laughed, drank wine, and made small talk while I floated among them like a ghost. I watched them with detached curiosity, like I was observing strangers play out a script I'd already memorized. They complimented the meal, criticized the gravy, made plans for Christmas, all under a roof that no longer belonged to any of them. Every now and then, I caught myself smiling, not because I was happy, but because I finally knew something they didn't. When Nina leaned back in her chair and sighed, "This feels like home," I had to look away to hide my expression. It did feel like home for them. For me, it was the calm before the storm. The moment right before the truth would tear through everything they thought they knew. After dessert, while everyone lingered in the living room, I slipped away quietly. Upstairs, I opened my closet one last time. The hangers swung gently, the shelves nearly empty. I ran my fingers over the few clothes I'd left behind, took one deep breath, and whispered to myself, "You did it." When I went back downstairs, my family was laughing about something on the television. They didn't even notice I'd been gone. That was when I knew I was truly ready to let go. That night, as I washed the final dish, my phone buzzed with a text from Darla. Everything confirmed. Key handoff set for 9 a.m. Friday. I stared at the message, smiling. Tomorrow, the truth would start to unfold. For now, I let the warm water run over my hands and closed my eyes. The calm before the storm was the sweetest peace I'd ever felt. They thought they'd come to celebrate Thanksgiving, they were walking into a goodbye. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon, roasted turkey, and secrets. The house was warm, glowing with candlelight and the low hum of soft jazz playing from the kitchen speaker. It looked perfect, picture perfect, the way my mother liked things. But beneath that calm surface, my chest buzzed with quiet anticipation. Every smile, every polite nod I gave that morning carried a secret my family couldn't even begin to guess. This was their last Thanksgiving in this house. I woke early before the sun rose to prepare the food. I wanted the day to unfold smoothly, no suspicion, no hint of what was coming. As the coffee brewed, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, steady eyes, calm face. I didn't look like a woman about to change everything. I looked like a good daughter, the dependable one. the role I'd played so well for so long. By 10 o'clock, the first knock came. My mother arrived first, dressed in a beige sweater set and pearls, clutching a pumpkin pie like a crown jewel. "I brought dessert," she announced as if it were breaking news. "And I told Elaine to bring the good wine. You remembered to polish the silverware, right?" "Of course," I said smoothly. "Everything's ready." She surveyed the room approvingly. "I must say, Camille, this house always feels like home. You've made it so inviting." There it was again, that word. Home. As if it was something she could claim by repetition. I smiled faintly, setting the pie on the counter. "I'm glad it feels that way, Mom." Elaine and Marcus arrived next, carrying shopping bags that clinked with bottles. Elaine wore a bright red dress, already talking before the door fully opened. "Cam! You wouldn't believe the traffic. Anyway, we brought champagne and wine. Marcus's parents are joining later, oh, and I hope you don't mind. They're bringing a dessert too." I did mind. But I just nodded. Of course. The more, the merrier. Inside, my pulse quickened. Each new arrival brought us closer to the moment I'd been planning for months. Nina came last, wearing a glittery gold dress that looked more fit for a nightclub than Thanksgiving dinner. Her boyfriend, Travis, followed behind her carrying a case of beer. "We figured this would make dinner more fun," Nina said with a laugh. I plastered on a smile, always thinking ahead. By noon, the house was full of people, noise, and unspoken tension. The air felt heavy with perfume, food, and pretense. I moved through it like a ghost hostess, making sure everyone had a drink, topping off glasses, answering questions, all while keeping my secret tucked neatly behind my polite smile. At one point, I stepped into the living room to check the thermostat. Elaine and my mother were already seated on the couch, talking in hushed voices. "I think she's finally calming down," my mother said. "She's been different lately, quieter." Elaine nodded. "Good. Maybe she's realizing this house is meant for all of us, not just her." I froze. My fingers curled against my side. The audacity of it still shocked me, even after everything. But I said nothing. I just adjusted the thermostat and left the room silently. Let them talk. Their words no longer had power over me. By 2 o'clock, the Whitmores had texted to say they'd be stopping by briefly to take measurements before moving in. The timing couldn't have been more ironic. I told them it was fine, just come quietly through the side door, and we'd keep it short. As I finished arranging the table, my mother hovered beside me. "You should really consider moving that buffet to the wall. It would open up the space." I bit back a laugh. "I'll think about it." Then came the moment that almost ruined everything. The doorbell rang. I glanced toward the hallway, my heart hammering. It was the Whitmores right on schedule. But my family was in the next room. I needed to keep the visit short and vague. I opened the door just enough to let them in. "Hi, Logan. Hi, Sierra. Come on in. Thank you for being on time." They smiled warmly, dressed neatly, holding a small measuring tape and a notepad. "We won't take long," Logan said. "No problem," I said quickly. "The family's in the other room. They think your decorator's checking something for me." Sierra laughed softly. "Got it, our secret." They moved quietly through the house, measuring the living room windows, whispering about curtain rods and crib placement. I followed them with a strange sense of peace. Watching them admire the home, seeing Sierra's eyes light up as she imagined their daughter's nursery, it reminded me why I'd done all this. The house deserved laughter that was pure, not poisoned by entitlement. As they finished, Sierra touched my arm gently. "It's a beautiful home, Camille. Thank you for trusting us with it." I smiled. "Take good care of it." When they left, I exhaled slowly. My family hadn't noticed. The secret remained safe, at least for now. Dinner started at 4. The table was crowded. Conversation loud, laughter forced. Marcus dominated the talk with stories from work, while my mother critiqued the mashed potatoes for being too creamy. Nina kept leaning over to whisper jokes to Travis, who was already on his third beer. I sat at the head of the table, smiling, nodding, playing my part one last time. But I could feel the tension brewing the way it always did. It was only a matter of time before someone said something sharp, something cruel, and the mask slipped from all of us. It started with a seemingly harmless comment from Elaine. "Camille, you really should host more often. You're so good at this." My mother nodded. "Yes, dear, it just makes sense. This house was meant for family gatherings. It brings everyone together." I set my fork down gently. "It's funny you say that. Because I was thinking the opposite." Elaine looked up. "What do you mean?" "I think this might be the last Thanksgiving I host here." The words hung in the air. My mother frowned. "Don't be ridiculous. Where else would we go? Maybe Elaine could host next year," I said evenly. Elaine laughed. "Oh, please. You love hosting." I smiled faintly. "Not as much as you think." The table went quiet for a moment. The air thickened, like everyone could sense something was off but couldn't quite name it. Then Nina, ever oblivious, broke the tension with a laugh. "Well, wherever we do it, I call dibs on not cooking." Everyone chuckled. The moment diffused but barely. I could feel Elaine's eyes on me, studying me, sensing something different. She tilted her head. "You've been weird lately, Camille. Are you sure everything's okay?" I met her gaze calmly. "Everything's better than okay." She frowned. "You're being cryptic." I just smiled and took another bite of turkey. "You'll see." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the house in a golden glow. Inside, laughter returned, though it felt more hollow now. I poured wine, cleared plates, listened to them chatter about Christmas plans, all while knowing they were making plans in a house that no longer belonged to them. Every sound, every glance, every careless comment felt like a countdown. The storm was coming. That's when the argument exploded like fireworks across the dinner table. I never imagined my family would fight over a home while I sat silently holding the secret that it wasn't mine anymore. The explosion started small, like it always did with Elaine's voice. It was sharp, casual, and laced with that condescending tone she used when she wanted to get under my skin. "So, Camille," she said, swirling her wine. "Have you finally decided what to do about that extra bedroom upstairs? You could rent it out or, I don't know, let Mom move in. It's silly having all that space go to waste." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. There it was, the spark. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in, smiling sweetly. "Oh, that's actually a good idea. I was thinking, if I ever sell my house, I could just move here. We'd save so much money. And I could help you around the house." Nina chimed in, laughing. "Yeah, you'd basically have live-in help. Mom can cook, Elaine can organize, and I'll keep you entertained." They all laughed. Except me. I set my fork down slowly, staring at the flickering candles. "You're all serious, aren't you?" Elaine shrugged. "Of course we are. It just makes sense. You're alone here most of the time. We're family, we should look out for each other." I took a sip of wine to steady myself. "Look out for each other," I repeated softly. Funny, because that sounds a lot like move in and take over. Elaine rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, don't twist it. We're just saying you don't need all this space. It's practically the family home anyway." The words hit me like déjà vu, family home. I felt my pulse quicken. I smiled faintly. "You keep calling it that. But it's not the family home. It's my home." Nina frowned, leaning forward. "Geez, Cam, you're so touchy lately." "We're just talking." "No," I said, my voice firmer. "You're not just talking. You're planning. You're always planning for what's mine." The table went quiet for a moment. My mother sighed heavily, like I was being difficult again. "Camille, don't be dramatic. We're just thinking ahead. One day, when you're gone..." "When I'm gone?" I repeated, staring at her. She blinked. "Well, you know what I mean. You don't have kids. Who else would this house go to? We're just being practical." Something inside me snapped, not in rage this time, but in clarity. I leaned back in my chair and said quietly, "Do you all hear yourselves?" Elaine's lips curved into that patronizing smile she'd perfected. "We're not the enemy, Cam. You don't need to get defensive. It's not like we're asking for your money." "Not yet," I murmured. She frowned. "Excuse me?" I looked her straight in the eye. "You're not asking for my money yet. Just my house, my space, my peace." Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey, maybe we should just change the topic." "No, Marcus," Elaine snapped. "She needs to hear this. Camille's always been so possessive. We're trying to include her, and she acts like she's being robbed." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Include me? You moved into my home without asking. You've turned my kitchen into your workspace, my guest room into your bedroom, and my living room into your lounge. That's not inclusion, Elaine. That's invasion." My mother put her fork down, her voice firm. "Camille, watch your tone. We're family." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You hide behind that word like it's permission for bad behavior." Nina groaned. "Here we go again. You love playing the victim." I turned to her. "You're right. I used to. Not anymore." The air in the room changed thick, electric. Elaine smirked. "Oh, please, don't start your pity speech again. You've always had it easier than us. You don't have kids, you don't have real bills, you just work, come home, and play homeowner Barbie." I tilted my head. "You think it's easy being the one everyone uses? The one you dump your problems on? The one you take from because you know she'll never say no?" Elaine's smirk faltered. I stood up slowly, resting my hands on the edge of the table. "Do you want to know something funny? I spent years thinking if I gave enough time, money, energy, you'd finally respect me. But all it did was teach you that I was weak." My mother's voice softened. "Camille, we didn't mean—" "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't try to fix it with soft words. You meant every single thing. You think you're entitled to my life because we share blood. But that doesn't make you family. It just makes you relatives." Nina stood, scoffing. "You're being ridiculous. You'll regret saying all this." "Maybe," I said, meeting her gaze. "Or maybe I'll finally sleep in. Peace." Elaine pushed her chair back with a screech. "You know what? Fine. If you want to be alone, be alone. Just don't come crying to us when you realize you need us." I smiled, a slow, cold smile that even startled me. "Oh, don't worry. That won't be a problem." My mother was staring at me now, confusion and concern blending in her eyes. "Camille, what are you saying?" I looked around the table at their stunned faces, at the plates of untouched food, at the home they thought they'd claimed. And then, softly, I said, "You're fighting over something that isn't yours." Elaine scoffed. "It's ours because it's yours. That's how family works." I took a deep breath. "No, Elaine. It's not. Not anymore." The words slipped out almost by instinct, but I stopped myself before revealing the truth. Not yet. I wasn't ready to give them that satisfaction. I wanted them to stew in confusion first. Instead, I smiled and said, "I think it's time you all went home. Dinner's over." Elaine blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get your coats." Marcus looked at his wife, then at me. "Maybe we should just go, honey." Elaine opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she saw my face. Something in my expression must have told her this wasn't a request. They left in stunned silence. My mother muttered something about being disappointed in me, but even she didn't linger. Nina rolled her eyes, muttered, "Whatever," and followed them out. When the door finally clicked shut behind them, the silence was deafening. For the first time in years, my home was mine again, if only for one more night. I stood there in the quiet aftermath, the half-eaten turkey growing cold on the table, the candles flickering low. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from release. I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls one last time. Tomorrow, They'd all come back demanding explanations, apologies, maybe even forgiveness. But it wouldn't matter. The decision had already been made, because what they didn't know was that their argument meant absolutely nothing. The house was already sold. As they left, I knew I was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The front door closed with a sharp click, and for the first time that day, silence filled the house. No laughter, no complaints, no footsteps, just silence, the kind that sits heavy, like dust settling after a storm. I stood in the hallway staring at the space where they'd been just moments before, my chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. It was over. Thanksgiving dinner, the last one I'd ever host in this house, was done. The air smelled faintly of roasted turkey and apple pie, but the sweetness couldn't mask the bitterness that lingered. I looked around the dining room, plates half-eaten, wine glasses stained, napkins tossed carelessly on the table, and felt a strange calm. They'd treated my home like a playground for years, but this time, I wasn't the one left powerless, because by this time tomorrow, it wouldn't be my home or theirs at all. I cleaned up slowly, methodically, like closing the final chapter of a long, painful story. Each dish I washed felt symbolic, each wiped surface another piece of my past scrubbed away. The house was silent except for the hum of the dishwasher and the occasional creak of the floorboards. When the counters were clear, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the table, staring at the empty chairs where my family had Saturday. Their voices still echoed faintly in my mind: Elaine's arrogance, Nina's indifference, my mother's guilt-laced manipulation. But beneath all of that noise, a new feeling pulsed quietly in my chest: peace. I had done it. No more family home. No more uninvited visits. No more backhanded comments or entitlement disguised as love. The house was sold. The deal final. And by Friday morning, I'd hand over the keys. I walked to the living room window, pulled the curtain back slightly, and looked outside. The street was empty, except for the faint glow of porch lights. Somewhere nearby, I heard the muffled sounds of another family laughing. Real laughter, joyful, free. Mine had always been different: forced smiles, fake cheer, barbed words disguised as jokes. But not anymore. I slept that night without nightmares for the first time in months. The next morning I woke to a quiet house, sunlight streaming through the blinds, and a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I brewed coffee, ate breakfast in silence, and smiled to myself. Today was the day I would tell them. I'd debated whether to keep the truth to myself forever, just move away, start fresh, and let them figure it out when they drove by one day and found strangers living here. But no, they needed to hear it from me. They needed to see the consequence of what they'd done, the result of years of taking me for granted. They deserved to know that the home they'd fought over was never theirs to begin with. So, around noon, I sent a message in the family group chat. Can everyone come by this evening? There's something important I need to discuss. The replies came quickly. Elaine, are you okay? Nina. What's going on? Did Mom say something to you again? Mom. I'll be there at 5. Don't overreact about yesterday. We're family. I almost laughed out loud. I spent the rest of the afternoon making the house look presentable, not for them, but for closure. I lit candles, arranged the throw pillows, and even brewed a pot of coffee. The smell filled the house, comforting and calm. By 5 o'clock, the first car pulled into the driveway. My mother walked in first, her expression cautious. Camille, you sounded serious. What's this about? You'll see, I said softly. Elaine and Marcus arrived next, followed by Nina and her boyfriend, Travis. They all filed in, talking quietly, their energy uneasy. I gestured for them to sit in the living room. The room fell silent as I took a deep breath and looked at the faces of the people I'd loved and endured my whole life. I'm glad you came, I began. I know last night got heated, but I think it's time we finally clear a few things up. Elaine sighed. Camille, if this is about the argument, let's just drop it. Everyone said things they didn't mean. Oh, I meant every word, I said calmly. And I think you all need to hear the rest. They exchanged confused glances. I reached over to the coffee table and picked up a neatly folded envelope, the final closing documents from the sale. I placed them in front of me and slid them across the table. Elaine frowned. What's that? My house, I said softly. Correction. The house that used to be mine. Nina blinked. What do you mean, used to be? I met her eyes, steady and unflinching. I sold it. The words hung in the air like thunder. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Elaine laughed nervously. What are you talking about? You can't just sell it? I can, I said evenly. And I did. The sale closed 2 days ago. The new owners move in tomorrow. My mother's face went pale. Camille, please tell me this is some kind of joke. I'm not joking. Elaine's voice rose, shrill and trembling. You can't just sell the family home. I tilted my head slightly. There's that phrase again, family home. But it was never yours. It was mine. You just convinced yourselves otherwise. Nina's mouth fell open. You did this just to spite us? No, I said, my voice low but firm. I did it to save myself. Elaine slammed her hand on the coffee table. You're unbelievable. Where are we supposed to go for holidays now? Where's Mom supposed to stay when she needs help? I looked her dead in the eye. Wherever you like. But not here. My mother whispered, her voice shaking. How could you do this to us? How could you? I countered. You all treated me like a convenience. You walked in and out of my home, my life, as if everything I owned belonged to you. You laughed about what would happen to my house when I died while I was sitting right there. Tell me, what exactly did you expect me to do? Keep playing hostess until I broke? Elaine stared at me, her jaw tight. You'll regret this. You'll regret cutting off your family. I smiled faintly. I think I'll finally breathe. Nina crossed her arms, shaking her head. You've lost it. Maybe, I said. Or maybe, for the first time, I've found myself. They didn't have a response. The silence that followed was almost serene. I could see it sinking in the disbelief, the realization that their grip on me was gone. They weren't angry because they loved me. They were angry because they'd lost control. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the fading light paint the walls gold one last time. The buyers are a young couple, I said quietly. They'll love this place the way I used to. It deserves that. Elaine's voice cracked. You're really not kidding, are you? I turned back to face them. No, the papers are signed, the money's cleared. By tomorrow morning, this house will belong to them. My mother covered her mouth, her eyes glistening. I don't even know who you are anymore. I took a deep breath. I'm someone who finally learned to stop being used. No one said another word. When they finally stood to leave, the atmosphere was heavy, hollow. Elaine muttered something under her breath. Nina avoided my eyes, and my mother just shook her head in disbelief. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone again. I sank onto the couch, exhaling slowly. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from relief. The truth was out. The burden was gone. I glanced at the envelope. Still on the coffee table, the documents that proved everything was real, and I smiled. It was done. When I said, "You don't have to fight over this house, it's already sold," the silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop before Elaine screamed my name. The sound ripped through the quiet house like glass shattering. Her face twisted, a mix of disbelief and fury, her voice trembling as she pointed a shaking hand at me. You can't be serious, Camille. You sold it? To who? Why? Are you out of your mind? I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for this exact moment, for the anger, the outrage, the denial. I'd prepared for it like armor. Calmly, I replied, to a nice couple. They'll move in tomorrow. Their names are Logan and Sierra Whitmore. Elaine blinked, stunned. As if the names themselves were an insult. You sold our family's house to strangers? Our family's house? I repeated, my voice steady. You mean the house I worked for, paid for, and maintained while you treated it like a vacation spot? Yes, Elaine, I sold my house to strangers. Her mouth opened and closed like she couldn't find words big enough to contain her fury. You're insane, completely insane. My mother gasped beside her, clutching the back of the couch as if she might faint. Camille, you didn't even talk to us about this. You didn't consult anyone. I let out a small laugh, cold, humorless. Consult? Mom, it's not a democracy. I'm not required to hold a family meeting before I make a decision about my own life. Her face hardened. You're being cruel, thoughtless, after everything we've done for you. I cut her off, my voice firm. Everything you've done for me? You mean the guilt trips? The entitlement? The uninvited visits? Let's not rewrite history. Nina, who'd been quiet until then, stood up abruptly. Okay, this is messed up. Like, actually messed up. You didn't even warn us. Why? Would I? I asked. If I had, you would have done everything in your power to stop me. Elaine slammed her hands on the table, the sound echoing through the living room. Damn right we would have. You're making a huge mistake. I turned to her slowly. No, Elaine. The mistake was letting all of you turn my home into a prison. The mistake was thinking love meant letting myself be trampled. Her face reddened. You're overreacting. We're family, Camille. We're supposed to look out for each other. I met her gaze evenly. Looking out for me would have meant respecting me. You never did that. Marcus, who had been standing awkwardly near the doorway, finally spoke up. Maybe we should all take a breath, Elaine rounded on him. Don't you dare defend her. He raised his hands. I'm not defending anyone. I'm saying yelling isn't going to help. She glared at him, then turned back to me. Seething. You've lost it, Cam. Seriously. Selling your own house just to prove some point? Who does that? I sighed. Someone who's tired. Someone who's done being taken for granted. Nina shook her head, pacing. So what now, huh? You're just gonna, what? Move into an apartment and cut us off? Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what I'm going to do. The room erupted again. Elaine started shouting about betrayal. My mother moaned about losing her family, and Nina threw her hands in the air, muttering that she couldn't deal with this drama. It was chaos, pure, unfiltered chaos. But for the first time in years, I wasn't part of it. I just stood there, watching, detached, almost curious at how predictable they were. They begged, then they accused. They guilted, then they threatened. It was like watching a performance they'd rehearsed their entire lives. Finally, when their voices started to crack from yelling, I spoke again softly, but firmly. You're wasting your breath. It's done. The sale is final. The money's in my account. The papers are signed. Tomorrow morning, the Whitmores get the keys. You can scream all you want, but it won't change a thing. Elaine's voice shook with rage. You don't understand what you've done. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I just don't care anymore. That last sentence hit her like a slap. She blinked, stunned. You don't care? About your own family? I smiled faintly. No, Elaine. I don't care about people who only show up when they need something. That's not family. My mother's voice broke through the tension, trembling and small. Camille, you're talking like a stranger. What happened to you? I looked at her sadly. You happened to me, Mom. All of you did. You turned every good thing I ever did into a burden. You made my generosity feel like obligation. Tears welled in her eyes. We just wanted to be close. No, I said quietly. You wanted control. The words hung there like smoke, filling the air with everything we'd never said aloud. Elaine turned away, pacing, muttering to herself. Then she spun back around. Fine. You know what? Go ahead, sell your stupid house. But don't come crawling back when you realize you've ruined everything. I nodded once. I won't, Nina snorted. You think you're some kind of martyr, don't you? Like you're teaching us a lesson. You're not. You're just lonely. Her words might have cut once, but now they just bounced off. I'm finally free. Elaine grabbed her coat, her movements sharp. You're going to regret this, Camille. One day you'll wake up and realize family is all you have. I smiled gently. Then I guess I'll be fine with having nothing. That shut her up. The tension in the room was suffocating. My mother finally stepped forward, her face pale. If you do this, she whispered, if you really walk away, you'll lose us. I met her gaze, unflinching. Then maybe it's time I did. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Elaine stormed out first, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. Marcus followed quietly, shaking his head. Nina muttered something under her breath, grabbed Travis's hand, and left. My mother lingered at the door for a long moment, her voice soft, almost broken. "You'll regret this, Camille. I promise you will." I looked at her, and for a fleeting second, I saw the woman who used to read me bedtime stories when I was little. The mother, but that version of her was gone, buried under years of expectation and control. I swallowed hard and said the only thing I could. Maybe. But I'll finally regret something that was mine to choose. She didn't respond. She just left, closing the door behind her. And then finally, it was quiet again. The kind of quiet that felt holy. I walked through the empty rooms slowly, feeling the weight lift with every step. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just free. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about who might show up uninvited or who might rearrange my life without asking. Tomorrow, I'd hand over the keys, walk away, and never look back. I poured myself a final glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the hardwood floors. The house looked peaceful again, like it was exhaling too. For once, I saw fear in their eyes, not because they lost the house, but because they'd lost control over me. I packed my last box with shaking hands but a steady heart. The morning sunlight poured through the windows, soft and golden, catching the floating dust in the air. It was the same light that had greeted me every morning for years, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't my light anymore. It was saying goodbye. The house was nearly empty now. The walls that once held laughter and tension stood bare, stripped of family photos and reminders of who I used to be. The rooms echoed faintly when I moved, like the house itself was sighing with me, grateful to finally rest. It was early, just after 7, when Darla arrived. She stepped inside with her usual calm smile, clipboard in hand, her heels tapping softly against the floor. "Morning, Camille," she said. "How are you feeling?" I paused, looking around the quiet house one last time. "Lighter," I admitted. "Tired, but lighter." Darla nodded knowingly. "That's what peace feels like. You'd be surprised how many people forget what that feels like until they leave something behind." She handed me a small envelope, the final set of documents for my records, and placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "You did something brave," she said. "Letting go isn't easy, especially when it's tied to pain that feels like family." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel brave. It just feels necessary." She nodded again, then added softly, "They'll come around someday. People always do when they realize control doesn't equal love." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if I believed that. When she left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, taking it all in one last time: the kitchen where I'd cooked countless meals for people who never said thank you. The staircase where I'd sat crying after long arguments. The living room where I'd hosted holidays that always ended in guilt. This house had seen the best and worst of me. But it had also witnessed my awakening. I set my final box down by the front door and took a deep breath. The air smelled faintly of vanilla candles and lemon cleaner. Clean, fresh, ready for its next chapter. Before I walked out, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small folded note. I'd written it the night before. It wasn't for my family, it was for the new owners. I placed it on the kitchen counter, right beside the keys. "Welcome home. May this place bring you peace, laughter, and love. Take care of it, it deserves that." As I turned the key in the lock one final time, a strange calm settled over me. No sadness, no second thoughts. Just quiet certainty. The driveway felt longer than usual as I carried the last box to my car. I loaded it into the trunk, then paused, resting my hands on the cool metal. My reflection in the car window looked different, older, maybe. Stronger, definitely. Driving away, I didn't look back right away. I focused on the road, the rhythmic sound of the tires on asphalt, the city skyline rising in the distance. Only when I turned the final corner did I glance into the rearview mirror. The house stood small and still in the morning light, the front windows glowing softly. For the first time, it didn't feel like mine. And that was okay. My new apartment was waiting, a cozy one-bedroom downtown, with tall windows and the faint hum of city life outside. It wasn't nearly as big, but it felt alive in a way the old house hadn't in years. When I arrived, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space was simple, bare walls, boxes stacked neatly in the corner, and a faint echo of emptiness. But it was my emptiness, my clean slate. I spent the first few hours unpacking slowly, letting the rhythm of it ground me. I placed my father's watch on the windowsill, my favorite books on the shelf, and a small plant on the kitchen counter. Each item felt like a piece of my identity returning to its rightful place. When I finally sat down on the couch, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It comforted me. It felt like truth. That evening, I decided to walk around the neighborhood. The streets were lined with small cafes, art stores, and cozy little restaurants. People strolled by laughing, couples holding hands, a dog tugging at its leash. It was ordinary life, simple, unpretentious, unburdened. I realized then how much of my life had been built around other people's comfort. I'd been so busy making everyone else feel at home that I'd forgotten what it meant to have one myself. Now, for the first time, I did. A few days later, Darla called to check in. "Just wanted to make sure you're settling in okay," she said. "I am," I told her honestly. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel sad. But I don't. I just feel free," she chuckled. "Freedom is a powerful thing, Camille. You'll get used to it." We talked briefly about logistics, then she mentioned something unexpected. "The Whitmores said to tell you thank you. They found your note. They said it made them cry." That made me smile. "They'll be good to that house," I said quietly. "I think they will," Darla replied. "And so will you to yourself." When I hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights flickering on. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a knock on the door or a phone call demanding something from me. The peace was uninterrupted. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. My first entry was simple. Today, I chose myself. And for once, that was enough. Days turned into weeks. I settled into a new routine: work, morning coffee from the shop down the street, quiet dinners with no arguments. On weekends, I visited the local art gallery, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I even started painting again, letting colors spill onto canvas without worrying what anyone thought. Every time I dipped a brush into paint, I thought of that old house not with bitterness, but gratitude. It had been both my burden and my teacher. One night, while sketching near the window, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of the house, its porch newly painted white, a little girl's tricycle in the driveway. Underneath was a message: "We love it here, thank you for trusting us. Sierra." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. That image of laughter and innocence in the place that once held resentment felt like closure. I set my phone down, looked around my apartment, and realized something profound. I hadn't just moved out of a house, I'd moved out of a version of myself that was too afraid to say no. The woman who'd let everyone walk over her was gone. The woman standing here now was different, softer, but stronger. I closed my journal, turned off the lamp, and stood by the window. The city below shimmered like 1,000 new beginnings. Freedom wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet. It was sipping tea alone at midnight without guilt. It was knowing no one would barge in demanding attention. It was choosing peace over people who mistook love for control. Freedom didn't come from selling the house, it came from no longer seeking their approval. It took losing the house for my family to finally hear what I'd been saying for years. Nearly 3 months had passed since I'd handed over the keys. In that time, I hadn't spoken much to my mother or sisters. The silence between us was vast, stretching like an ocean neither side wanted to cross. But unlike before, that silence didn't hurt, it healed. Life in my new apartment had settled into a peaceful rhythm. I woke up early, made my own coffee without anyone criticizing how strong it was, and spent my evenings painting or reading instead of cleaning up after uninvited guests. I had space to think, to breathe, to just be. But one quiet Sunday morning, as I sat on the balcony sipping tea, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Elaine. For a moment, I just stared at it. My stomach tightened. Part of me considered ignoring the call, but curiosity or maybe closure made me swipe to answer. Her voice was softer than I expected. "Hey, Cam." I took a breath. "Hi, Elaine." A long pause. Then she said, "I drove by the old house yesterday. I waited, unsure where this was going. It looks nice," she continued, her tone hesitant. "They repainted it. There's a swing on the porch now." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I heard. The new owners have a little girl." "Right." Another pause. "It's weird, though, seeing someone else there. I guess I thought it would always be part of us." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I wanted her to sit in that truth, to feel what I'd felt every time they treated me like I was just the caretaker of something they thought they owned. Finally, she said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night." "Which part?" I asked quietly. She exhaled. "About control. About how we treated you. I think you were right. We took advantage of you." Her admission hit me harder than I expected. I'd imagined it so many times, her apology, but hearing it now didn't make me gloat. It just made me sad. Sad that it had taken all this to make her see. "I appreciate you saying that," I said softly. "It means more than you think." Elaine hesitated, then added, "I was jealous. You know, you had what I always wanted, stability. But instead of being proud of you, I made you feel small for it. I'm sorry." For a moment, my throat tightened. This was the sister who had mocked me, used me, dismissed me, and now her voice trembled with sincerity. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means a lot." We talked for another 15 minutes. It wasn't emotional or dramatic, just honest. When we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the city skyline, feeling something shift inside me. Forgiveness wasn't instant, it never is, but this felt like the first brick removed from the wall that had separated us. 2 days later, I got a text from Nina. Short, clumsy, but honest. "Hey. I know I was kind of a brat about everything. I didn't get it before. But I get it now. I'm sorry, Cam. I really am." I didn't reply right away. I read it several times, letting the words settle. Nina had always been the carefree one, too wrapped up in her own chaos to notice how her actions hurt others. The fact that she even recognized it now told me something had changed. That same week, I got a call from Mom. Her number flashing on the screen made my pulse quicken. For all the progress with my sisters, my relationship with her had always been the most complicated. I answered cautiously. "Hi, Mom." "Camille," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," I admitted. She gave a small laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "I deserve that." There was a pause, then she said, "I drove by the house too. I saw a woman outside with her daughter. She was planting flowers along the fence." I smiled softly. "That sounds like Sierra. She always wanted a garden." "I thought I'd hate seeing someone else there," my mother continued quietly. "But I didn't. It looked happy. Lively. For the first time, I realized it never looked that way when we were there. We filled it with arguments and noise. You filled it with life." Her words caught me off guard. "Mom," I said carefully. "You don't have to." "No," she interrupted. "I do. I need to say this. I didn't see what I was doing to you. I thought I was helping, guiding, staying close, but I was controlling. I treated you like you owed me your peace because I raised you. That wasn't love. That was fear of being left behind." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. You didn't deserve that. For the first time in a long while, I felt tears rise, not from pain but from release. Thank you, Mom, I said softly. That means more than you know. She sniffled. I still miss you. I hope someday we can all start over. Maybe not like before, but something new. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Maybe we can. When we hung up, I sat there quietly, staring at my hands. My entire life, I'd wanted their validation. I'd twisted myself into shapes that fit their comfort. But now, for the first time, they were the ones seeking my understanding. It didn't erase the past, but it made it easier to live with. Weeks went by, and slowly, communication reopened. Small texts, occasional phone calls. Not the constant intrusion of before, but a cautious, respectful distance that felt healthier. Elaine invited me to dinner one weekend, neutral ground, a little Italian place near her office. When I arrived, she was already there, nervously stirring her coffee. She smiled when she saw me. You look good, Cam. Happier. I am, I said honestly. It's quiet. Peaceful. She nodded. I'm glad. I didn't understand what peace cost you before. We ate, we talked, and for the first time in years, it didn't end in tension. It ended in laughter. Tentative, but real. Later, as I drove home, I realized something profound. Forgiveness didn't mean letting them back into my life the way they'd been before. It meant letting go of the anger that chained me to them. They were learning too slowly, painfully, but sincerely. A few days later, my mother called again. Elaine and Nina want to host Thanksgiving this year, she said. I smiled at the irony. That's nice. She hesitated. We'd love for you to come, if you're ready. I thought about it for a long moment. The laughter, the arguments, the history, but also the growth, the apologies, the small cracks of light finally showing through. Maybe, I said softly. We'll see. Fair enough, she said gently. We'll keep a seat for you, just in case. After the call, I looked around my apartment, the warm glow of the lamps, the quiet hum of the city beyond my window. I realized I didn't need to decide right away. For once, I had time, space, choice. They finally understood what I'd been trying to say all along, that love without respect isn't love at all. And for the first time, the power to choose was entirely mine. That next Thanksgiving, my apartment smelled of roasted vegetables, not resentment. It was the first time in years that I woke up on the holiday without tension pressing against my chest. No frantic calls from my mother, no passive-aggressive texts from Elaine. No last-minute grocery runs or endless cleaning sprees to impress guests who never said thank you. Just quiet. I stood in my small kitchen, watching sunlight pour through the window onto the countertop. The city outside buzzed faintly, cars honking in the distance, neighbors laughing in the hallway, but inside, everything was still, peaceful. For the first time, I wasn't cooking for anyone else. I wasn't trying to please or prove anything. I made exactly what I wanted. Roasted sweet potatoes, a small turkey breast, green beans sautéed in garlic and butter, and one pumpkin pie. Simple. Enough for one. When I set the table, it struck me how small and beautiful it looked, just one plate, one glass, one candle flickering softly. I'd always been terrified of being alone on a day like this, but now that I was, it didn't feel lonely. It felt right. I sat down, folded my hands for a quiet moment of gratitude, and whispered, "Thank you for peace." The words weren't for anyone in particular. Maybe for God, maybe for the universe, maybe just for me. Halfway through my meal, my phone buzzed with a series of notifications. I smiled as I saw who they were from. Elaine, happy Thanksgiving, Cam. Hope you're eating something delicious today. Nina, miss you, sis. I brought Mom's stuffing recipe to Elaine's house. It's chaos, but the good kind. Love you. Mom, we're all thinking of you. No pressure, but we saved you a plate, just in case you change your mind. I stared at those messages for a long time, my eyes softening. The words were simple, But they felt different this time. No guilt, no manipulation, no expectation. Just love. I typed back one message to all of them. Thank you. I'm good. Truly. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hit send, set my phone aside, and took another bite of my meal. The food tasted better than any Thanksgiving dinner I'd ever hosted. Maybe it was the seasoning of freedom. After eating, I poured myself a glass of white wine and stepped out onto my balcony. The air was crisp, cool enough to make me pull my sweater tighter. Below, I could see glimpses of families through apartment windows, people laughing, clinking glasses, gathering around tables. For years, I'd thought that was what I wanted. Big gatherings, noise, togetherness. But now I understood that I'd been craving something else all along: belonging. And belonging didn't come from a full table. It came from peace within yourself. As I watched the city hum below, I thought about everything that had led me here, the years of being taken for granted, the exhaustion of carrying a family that never saw me, the guilt that kept me tied to their comfort at the expense of my own. Selling the house had felt like cutting off a limb back then, but now I realized it had been more like removing a tumor. Painful, yes, but necessary for healing. I'd spent so long defining my worth by what I could give. Now I was learning to value what I could keep. The doorbell rang suddenly, pulling me from my thoughts. I frowned, a little startled. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my neighbor, Jasmine, stood there, holding a pie. "Hey," she said cheerfully. "I made too many desserts and figured I'd share." "You're not allergic to pecans, are you?" I laughed, shaking my head. "No, not at all." "You're a lifesaver." She grinned. "Good. A few of us are having a small dinner upstairs if you want to join later. Totally casual, no pressure." I hesitated for a second, the instinct to decline bubbling up. But then I caught her warm smile and realized this was exactly what new beginnings looked like: unplanned, kind, and light. "Maybe I will," I said. "Thank you, Jasmine." She waved and disappeared down the hall. After she left, I placed the pie on the counter and stared at it for a moment. In my old life, I would have been too exhausted or bitter to even consider joining anyone. But now, I felt open, curious. Maybe healing didn't mean being alone forever. Maybe it meant choosing who you let in, one gentle step at a time. I cleaned up the kitchen, humming to myself as I loaded the dishwasher. The simple rhythm of ordinary life felt like music. When everything was in order, I lit another candle, poured another glass of wine, and sat down on the couch with my journal. I wrote slowly, letting the words flow. Last year, I hosted Thanksgiving for people who didn't see me. This year, I'm hosting it for myself. And it's enough. Maybe next year, I'll share it again with people who bring peace, not chaos. I closed the journal and smiled. Later that evening, I did end up going upstairs to Jasmine's apartment. The gathering was small, 6 people, all neighbors. A mix of laughter, stories, and the kind of comfort that comes from shared kindness rather than shared blood. No one expected anything from me. No one made me feel small. It was simple, genuine connection, the kind I'd always been starved for without realizing it. At one point, as I sat there listening to them trade stories about childhood Thanksgivings, Jasmine asked, "So, Camille, what's your favorite part of Thanksgiving?" I thought for a moment, smiling at the flickering candlelight. Honestly, the quiet part. The moment when everything slows down, and you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. She nodded thoughtfully. That's a good answer. When I walked back to my apartment, later that night, the city was quiet again. The sky above glowed faintly from the lights below, and a gentle wind brushed my hair. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and felt that familiar peace wrap around me. I looked at my small dining table, the empty plate, the half-finished pie. The single candle burned low and smiled. I whispered softly, "Happy Thanksgiving, Camille." And for once, I meant it. Because this time, my table wasn't surrounded by people who drained me, it was surrounded by peace, by self-respect, by freedom. I raised my glass of wine in a quiet toast to no one but myself. For the first time, my Thanksgiving table was full of peace, not people. People think houses hold memories, but sometimes they hold lessons. It was early spring when I finally decided to visit my old neighborhood again. I hadn't been back since handing over the keys to Logan and Sierra. For months, I'd avoided that part of town. Not because I was afraid of what I'd feel, but because I didn't want nostalgia to blur the peace I'd fought so hard to find. But that morning, something in me whispered it was time. Time to see it not as a wound, but as a chapter that had finally closed. The drive there felt strangely calm. The trees along the streets were starting to bloom again, their pink petals dusting the sidewalks. The air smelled faintly of fresh grass and sunlight, that soft scent that only spring carries. When I turned onto the familiar street, my heart gave a small, unexpected flutter. And then I saw it. The house. My house, though not anymore. It was painted a light sage green now, with white trim and a new swing hanging from the front porch. There were potted flowers on the steps, wind chimes by the window, and a child's chalk drawing scattered across the driveway. It looked alive in a way it hadn't for years. I parked across the street and sat for a while, just watching. The windows were open, curtains fluttering gently in the breeze. Laughter floated out a woman's laugh, bright and unguarded, followed by the sound of a child's giggle. For a moment, tears stung my eyes. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. The house had a soul again. I got out of the car and walked to the sidewalk, not intending to knock, just to look closer. But as I stood there, the front door opened. Sierra stepped out, her daughter, maybe 3 or 4 years old now, clutching her hand. She spotted me immediately and broke into a smile. "Camille!" I waved, surprised but happy to see her. "Hi, Sierra. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I was in the area and thought I'd just see the place." "Of course," she said warmly. "We were just heading to the park. Want to come in for a minute?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I'd love to." Inside, the house was different yet familiar. The furniture was new, but the layout was the same. The living room where my family had once argued now had toys scattered on the rug and family photos on the mantel, pictures of smiles that weren't strained. Sierra caught me looking and said softly, "It's funny. When we first moved in, I felt like the walls still remembered someone else's story. But over time, it started to feel like ours." I smiled. "That's exactly how it's supposed to be." Her daughter ran up to me, proudly holding a crayon drawing. "Look! That's our house." I knelt down to admire it. "It's beautiful," I said genuinely. "You're quite the artist," the little girl grinned, then ran back to the couch, humming to herself. Sierra poured us each a cup of tea, and we sat at the table, the same spot where I'd once endured so many painful conversations. Now, sunlight streamed across it like a quiet blessing. She said, "I wanted to thank you again, Camille. This house has changed our lives. Logan and I found out we couldn't have another child, and buying this place felt like our fresh start. It's nothing but good energy since the day we moved in." Her words warmed something deep inside me. "I'm glad," I said. "That house deserved laughter. It didn't always have it before." Sierra smiled softly. "Then I guess it found its way home." When I left a little while later, I stood on the porch for one last look. The wind chimes sang quietly, sunlight bouncing off the windows. The house didn't belong to me anymore, but in a strange way, it always would. It was the place where I'd learned my hardest lessons. As I walked back to my car, I whispered a quiet thank you not just to the house, but to the woman I'd been when I lived there. The woman who'd tried so hard to keep everyone else happy. The woman who'd finally learned that peace doesn't require permission. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in years. I thought about the life I'd built since then, simple, quiet, and entirely my own. My art had started selling online. I was taking weekend trips to new places, and, surprisingly, I'd started dating again, someone kind, patient, and respectful. His name was Evan, a photographer I'd met at a local art fair. He wasn't grand or loud like the men my sisters used to swoon over. He was steady, someone who listened more than he talked, who didn't try to fix me but simply made room for me. When I told him about my past, the house, my family, everything, he didn't judge. He just said, "You did what you had to do to survive." That's strength, not cruelty. It was the first time anyone had said that to me. That evening, I came home to my apartment and found a small vase of daisies sitting on the kitchen counter with a note from him. For the woman who built a home out of herself. I stood there for a long time, reading the note over and over, my heart full, because that's exactly what I'd done. My home was no longer a physical space, it was me, my boundaries, my choices, my peace. Later that night, I called my deforder mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Camille?" "Hi, Mom," I said softly. "I just wanted to wish you a happy spring." "Oh, sweetheart," she said, relief in her tone. "I was just thinking about you. Your sisters and I were talking, we're planning a family picnic next month. Nothing big, just us. Would you like to come?" I smiled. "Maybe, I'll let you know." She hesitated. "No pressure, I promise. We just miss you." "I know," I said, gently. "And I miss you too, but things are good right now. I just wanted you to know that." There was a pause. Then she said quietly, "I'm proud of you, Camille. For everything." My throat tightened. "Thank you, Mom." After we hung up, I went to my balcony and looked out over the city lights. The cool air brushed my face, and I thought about how far I'd come from the woman who once felt trapped by love to the woman who'd finally learned that love should never feel like a cage. I thought of my family not with anger, but with a kind of bittersweet affection. They were learning too. We all were. The house had been more than just walls and windows. It had been my greatest teacher. It showed me what happens when you give too much, when you forget that your worth isn't tied to what you can provide. It taught me that peace comes when you stop begging others to value it. And most importantly, it taught me that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. As the night deepened, I whispered to myself, "You did it, Camille. You came home." Because home wasn't an address anymore, it was a feeling I carried inside me. I didn't just sell a house, I sold my past, and finally came home to myself.